Will the Hokies' injury woes prove too much to overcome? A blast from the past for Duke and Virginia Tech, and a new segment making an appearance in the clutch. All that and more on this week's edition of the 3304 Sports Kickoff. Hello and welcome into the lovely Moss Arts Center in Blacksburg. So glad you can be with us. I'm Robert Bateman, joined alongside by Pierce McKnight and Key McCrinnan. And guys, we have a lot on the dock today, so let's just jump right in by talking Virginia Tech and Duke. The Hokies travel to Durham to take on the Blue Devils at 8 p.m. this Saturday, and it is an important one for Virginia Tech.
Very important for the Hokies. They are just like Luke Combs, and they are one number away. Just one win, and they're bowl eligible. I mean, we got the big game against UVA, and that's very important. They got to figure out their stuff out this week so they can be better prepared for UVA next week.
Yeah, of course, we'd love to keep the Commonwealth here in Blacksburg, which ideally will be the play, obviously. But, of course, we're going to Durham this weekend. Virginia Tech has a big matchup against a good defense. Manny Diaz knows how to coach over there. And it just seems like things haven't been working like you were saying. Sometimes the offense plays very well when the defense isn't, and vice versa. And we could talk so much about how the season was supposed to go, all the expectations and the returning starters, but we can only talk about what we are right now. That's 5-5, win one, and get your 8th bowl game in 10 years.
Now, rumor has it that not only Bayshaw Tootin, but also Kyron Drones might be missing for Virginia Tech. Do you think the Hokies can prevail without their QB1 and RB1?
Well, I feel like it showed a couple weeks ago against Syracuse that they were in that matchup for most of the entire way. That first half was actually sensational. From what we saw from Colin Schlee and what we saw from running backs Malachi Thomas and Jeremiah Coney, they showed that they can play. And another big thing about that, our defense for the first half for that game was playing exceptional. But, of course, in the second half, things fell apart. But I think if the defense plays the entire way through like it did against Syracuse, they can easily win the game against Duke.
Yeah, and Schlee has experience. He's played at Kent State for a couple years, and then he played at UCLA. He knows the Pac-12. He knows what it's like to be in the Big Four. And he'll be fine. He threw over 200 passing yards, threw for a touchdown and a rushing touchdown against Syracuse. And he actually had a good passing touchdown last week against Clemson. Well, I mean, he's not a bad quarterback. He has experience, and he should be fine against this Duke squad.
Well, the boys from Blacksburg are coming off a bye. How do you think they've game planned, knowing they might not have two of their star players?
They'll have to figure it out. They've probably been prepping for 2 weeks now since they had the bye week. They'll probably do the same thing they did against Syracuse, where they won't announce who's going to be the starting running back or quarterback. And it'll be very much mysterious for everybody as the commentators against the Cuse game, thinking Kyron Drones was on discipline. But, you know, it's fine because Virginia Tech knows what they need to do. They've run 2 quarterbacks all season, and they should be fine going into this game.
Yeah, I think even going back to it from what we saw in the Clemson game, Colin Schlee showed that he can play. Even though his touchdown did come towards the end of the game, some could call it garbage time, but we still like what we saw from him when Kyron Jones was not playing. As for the running backs, it seemed as though Tootin could not play, you're right. But Coney had a great game against Syracuse, 9 carries for 96 yards. He made a lot of big plays, and I could definitely see him playing a big factor against Duke. And like I said before, as long as the defense is playing up to its speed, I think Virginia Tech has a chance.
Yeah, well, earlier this week, Brent Pry took time to speak to the media about the Hokies' up-and-coming matchup with the Blue Devils. And for all you need to know about that press conference, here's our very own Hayden Tilbert.
A 2-bye-week schedule is new for the Hokies as the ACC expanded this past offseason, but it was much needed for Brent Pry and company as they are coming off 3 games with key players being banged up, that being Stephen Gosnell, Kyron Drones, and Bayshaw Tootin. Brent Pry talks about the status of injured players and how another bye week affected that.
The week was good, obviously. All of them got to really back off and get extra treatment and do everything we could. They're all questionable. Again, I know I say that, but we'll have to go out there and see how things go, the next 2 days. None of them are to a point right now where I can stand here and say they're going to play. But I'm hopeful.
Being healthy is crucial for the Hokies' success, not just overall, but also for a Duke defensive front that ranks 45th in the nation. Here's Price showing praise to the Blue Devil defense.
Well, they're a little bit like us. I don't know that they've garnered takeaways. They've done well in the red zone at times. I don't know that their run defense is where they want it to be, but their pass defense is very strong. It's a good group. And I think it starts up front.
Speaking of Duke's defense, Virginia Tech's defensive tackle Aeneas Peebles transferred from Duke, and he has continued his All-ACC third-team honors year with the Blue Devils to another outstanding year for the Hokies. Brent Pry talks about what homecoming game means to the graduate student from North Carolina.
He's a great young man, And he's, I'm sure, going to handle this with class, and he's got a ton of respect for his time there. He's got good memories. It was a healthy experience for him, and I think he'd feel the same way about his time here.
Sticking with the defense, Virginia Tech played lights out in the first half of the Clemson game, but gave up 24 points in the second half to end up losing by 10. Linebacker Caleb Woodson speaks on how the defense needs to finish games.
We just need to be on point towards the second half. We start strong as a defense. I feel like we really just got to finish and close out them tough games and close games.
Playing all 4 quarters is essential to winning football games against good teams. Duke has played well on the offensive side of the ball with Texas transfer QB Malik Murphy. Here's Woodson speaking on the Blue Devil offense.
All right, so what I've seen from Duke's offense is they do everything very well. They work together, the O-line works together, and they all do their job. So I feel like it's important we got to do our job and be on point, and that starts this week.
Speaking of doing their job, wide receiver Steven Gosnell leads the Hokies in receiving after suffering a torn ACL in the Military Bowl last season against Tulane. Gosnell tells us how he has recovered from the injury in just 11 months and discusses his work ethic, which makes him the player he is today.
It goes back to growing up. I grew up with 8 brothers, and most of them were older. So if you ain't tough, you're just gonna get trampled on. So, and then at the end of the day, this game really doesn't care how you feel. You got to go out there. Once you put those pads on, nobody knows how you're feeling. So you got to execute.
Now, Virginia Tech has had 2 weeks to prepare for Duke, and being 1 win away from bowl eligibility, it is crucial for the Hokies to finish the season strong and gain some momentum for a potential bowl game and the upcoming offseason.
Great job, Hayden. Well, guys, let's flip the script and talk a little bit about the Blue Devils, who have been pretty dominant this year, so far currently sitting at 7-3.
I think the big thing is head coach Manny Diaz came over from Penn State as defensive coordinator for James Franklin, and he came over and he's kind of set the tone for you have to go through his defense in order to win games. They averaged over almost 3 turnovers a game. Their third down conversion for opposing teams is 29%, which is fantastic, and that's on the defensive side. I think a fun thing to talk about is on the offensive side are their receivers. Jordan Moore and Eli Pansko, both over 500 yards, both have 5 touchdowns. They're really fun to watch.
Let's talk about the quarterback, Malik Murphy, coming from the University of Texas. He's not had a bad season so far. He's completed about 60% of his passes, 22 touchdowns, over 2,000 yards passing, 8 interceptions. That's the only downfall besides his rushing. He's about 17 carries for negative 71 yards. His longest rush this season is 8 yards. So he's not a dual threat QB, but he sure knows how to sling it. And that's not bad for this Duke squad because they're getting wins with that quarterback.
Yeah, winning for sure, 7 already this season. But Duke has had multiple close calls this year with a 3-1 record and 1-score games. Why do you think the Blue Devils have been so strong in the clutch?
I think the one thing to look at those games is the opponents they played. In those 3 wins, UConn, double OT with Northwestern, and a somewhat average UNC team. And then their one loss was, I believe, with Georgia Tech, was it?
Yes, that was one of their losses.
Yeah. So, and it almost wonders, how'd you only drop 14 points against a Georgia Tech team that's kind of underperformed? Their defense is still fantastic, obviously a huge part of their entire scheme. But I still look at it, I question the opponents they played, but they're still a very good team on the defensive side.
They're not a terrible team in the clutch, but then you look at it, they had 2 overtime games. They had the Northwestern, they won by 6 points in double overtime. They had a good loss, which there's no real good thing about a loss. But to this SMU squad, who's very dominant in the ACC, they lost by 1 point in overtime. And then they look at Miami. They were in that game for so long, but Miami just pulled out. They're not a great team in the clutch. They just have been playing bad opponents, I feel, in my opinion, that they are still going to win games. They have a good quarterback. They have a good defense. They got good everything. It's just they're not playing tough opponents, and that's why they're winning all these close games.
Yeah, I mean, strength of conference is always something to talk about, and both of these teams are no stranger to 1-score games in the ACC. And believe it or not, a decade ago, VT and Duke went down to the wire. Riley Klaus took a trip down memory lane to recall some of that contest events. Riley, what do you got?
1. It can be the smallest number in some contexts, but one play, one decision, or one game can have the biggest role in the outcome of an entire season. As Virginia Tech stands 1 win away from bowl eligibility, the build-up to Saturday's contest feels all too similar to 1 decade ago, when a 4-5 Hokie squad traveled down to Wallace Wade Stadium in November of 2014 to take on a red-hot Blue Devils team. Ranked 21st in the country at 8-1 overall, Duke played host to Virginia Tech, who was on a 3-game losing streak. In a matchup which came down to the wire, just 1 point would separate the two teams by game's end, and the all-important element of special teams would prove to be the biggest flaw and biggest gift for the Hokies. The contest started in expected fashion, with Duke's offense giving the Blue Devils a 10-point lead before Michael Brewer threw a touchdown strike in the corner of the end zone for the Hokies. Blue Devils kicker Ross Martin would make 2 of his next 3 field goals tries when this game got messier than the spilled over gravy boat on the Thanksgiving dinner table. Both sides traded interceptions before Tech converted a field goal. Then, a fumble straight out of Looney Tunes gave the Hokies a short field, and Bucky Hodges scored to give the Hokies their first lead, and after the extra point, just 1 point separated Virginia Tech and Duke. Beamer ball, a motto of Hokies teams for decades, was the ultimate ace in the hole to change games. But Frank Beamer pulled out one of the boldest cards possible in this matchup. On 4th and 16, with under 4 minutes to go, in their own territory and in the lead, the Hokies called a fake punt. Punter A.J. Hughes completed a pass, but it was short of the sticks, giving Duke a chance to win the game. The failure of Virginia Tech's special teams set up a game-winning field goal attempt for Duke's special teams with 2.5 minutes left, but Ross Martin missed the kick wide left. And after a desperation last drive from Duke stalled, the Hokies completed the upset, winning 17-16. 10 years later, a 5-5 Virginia Tech team who has lost their last 2 travels to Durham to face a 7-3 Duke squad, hoping for the same result of a victory, but in a smoother effort than a decade ago. At any moment, the yards to gain, the score, and the difference between a win or a loss is just one number away.
You can always expect some magic with Klaus in the house. Well, we've taken the time to cover plenty of Virginia Tech and Duke's up-and-coming matchup, but plenty of programs have been popping off in the New River Valley. And with that, we get to debut a new segment on 3304 Sports. So I'll send you over to Miles Jordan and the 2-minute drill.
Thanks, Rob. While Brent Pry and the Virginia Tech football team are coming off of bye week and are preparing to visit the Duke Blue Devils on Saturday, here's what's been happening in Blacksburg since Clemson traveled to Lane Stadium 2 weeks ago. It's time for the 2-minute drill. Let's get into some Hokie highlights. Virginia Tech's women's soccer team punched its ticket to the NCAA tournament last week and hosted Tennessee in the first round at Thompson Field last Friday. Tech forward Anna Weir wasted no time putting the ball in the net and scored in the 2nd minute of the game, the fastest goal in the Hokies' NCAA tournament program history to give Tech an early 1-0 lead. However, the Lady Vols punched back quickly, and Kennedy Price knocked a shot past Hokies goalie Lauren Hargrove to equalize things at 1 apiece. Both teams went into halftime tied until Tech midfielder Natalie Mitchell took the game into her own hands, netting the game winner in the 51st minute to grant the Hokies a 2-1 victory over Tennessee. The Hokies advance and will play number 2 UCLA tonight, hoping to capture their 2nd victory in the tournament and advance to the 3rd round for the first time since 2018. Now let's bring it over to Castle Coliseum, where on the same night as Mitchell's game winner, Tech's wrestling team took down the visiting number 8 Missouri Tigers in its home opener. The Hokies wrestlers won 7 out of their 10 matches for a final score of 23-10 in a dominant victory over a top 10 team in the nation. The highlight of the night was the Hokies' number 1 and defending national champion Caleb Henson, who took down Missouri's Logan Geoffrey by major decision, shutting out his opponent 9-0. Henson was recognized at the beginning of the match in front of the Hokie faithful, and his national championship banner will remain hanging in the rafters of Castle, etched in Virginia Tech's history forever. The Hokies take on number 18 Rutgers in Moss Art Center tonight at 7 p.m. for their 2nd home match of the year. Sticking in Castle, Megan Duffy and her group remain undefeated on their home floor, knocking off UNC Asheville, Coppin State, and Rutgers in the past week and a half. Carly Wenzel is having a breakout season as the Hokies' leading scorer, averaging 16.8 points per game, and Rose Mishaw has been a monster on the boards, capturing double-doubles in her last 2 outings and grabbing a career-high 17 rebounds against Rutgers. The Hokies' only loss this season came to Iowa and the Allied tip-off in Charlotte, but Tech has been near perfect outside of that slip-up. Tech hosts Elon on Saturday at 2 p.m. in Blacksburg and hopes to win its 4th straight in the past 11 days. Back to you guys.
Well done, Miles. All right, guys, let's just finish off by picking some of the games that Miles just previewed in the 2-minute drill. And we'll start with Virginia Tech women's soccer as they take on number 2 UCLA tonight.
Virginia Tech has a great squad, and we've shown some promise, but we've lost some close games that we should have won. But honestly, I think the 17-win UCLA team will be too much for the Hokies to handle tonight.
Kind of like you said, Natalie Mitchell, Anna Weir, and Taylor Price will do all they can. But like you said, I think UCLA has too much firepower, and they knock out the Hokies tonight.
Well, we'll keep it rolling with number 5 Virginia Tech hosting number 20 Rutgers in a wrestling duel tonight inside the Moss Arts Center.
I think at this point we can confidently say that Virginia Tech is a wrestling school. So much talent. Eddie Ventresca, Caleb Hinson, both dogs. I think they get it done tonight against the Rutgers.
It'll be a great matchup in Moss Art Center. That would be so dope to watch. But give me the Hokies for sure.
All right. I'll probably take the Hokies there, too. I just think they're so deep this year. You have Eddie Ventresca, Sam Latona, TJ Stewart, and how about the hitman, Caleb Henson, right? All right, let's keep it rolling with women's basketball hosting Elon this weekend.
Women's basketball. Virginia Tech is so good at women's basketball. Samaya Suffren, absolute dog on the defensive end that leads her offense. She had a great performance against Rutgers the other night. Give me the Hokies again this Saturday.
We're in a new era of women's basketball at Virginia Tech, obviously, but Carly Winslow is still a dog, like you just said, and also Karis Baker. She's also fantastic. Give me the Hokies tonight.
You know what? I'm a fan of the upstate, so give me Elon to take off the Virginia Tech women's basketball team this weekend, and let's flip it to the men's side of things. They go down to Florida to take on Michigan this weekend.
Ooh. I think this could be an ugly night for the Hokies. I think Michigan might have too much firepower with Dusty Mayo over there in Michigan, so I think the Wolverines take this one easily.
Michigan, not even close. This Virginia Tech squad is in a rough stage, being so young. They're working out the kinks, but give me Michigan by at least double digits.
Yeah, I'll probably sit with you guys there, too. Virginia Tech men's basketball has already lost to Penn State out of the Big Ten this year. I think they lose to Michigan this time out of the Big Ten. And we'll go to our final matchup. It's the game we previewed all day. Virginia Tech football goes to Duke in Durham this Saturday for an 8 p.m. kickoff. Guys, who do you got?
There's too many questionable players being out for Virginia Tech. I think I have to take Duke here just because of the potential injuries. And I think Virginia Tech's just storing up their healthy players just for UVA because that's the one game that they need to go to a bowl game. They just need to beat UVA. I think we kind of just blow by this Duke game and give me Duke.
Yeah, possibly no Drones, no Tootin, no Thomas. So most likely running with Schlee and Coney like it was the Syracuse game. And I think we'll be under one of those situations against Clemson where our defense was on the field for too long and they just get tired. And I don't know how much they can stand Malik Murphy in that offense. So I think I'll agree with you. I could go to Duke levels as well.
Well, you know what? Schlee and Coney brought Syracuse all the way to overtime. So give me Virginia Tech. They need this game if they want to go to a bowl game and improve on their record from last year. So I'll take the Hokies in that final matchup. And with that, that'll do it for us here on 3304 Sports. A big thank you to all our reporters today, Hayden Tolbert, Riley Klaus, and of course, Miles Jordan with our new segment, The 2-Minute Drill, for Pierce McKnight and Key McCrimmon. I'm Robert Bateman, and we'll see you next time in a couple of weeks on 3304 Sports.